history literacy. This is the October 2024 version of the rest of Chapter 8 and Chapter 1. So let's dive right in. Last time we were talking about language and literacy. We were looking at that it's not a primary visual skill because it involves so many other processes of the brain, auditory processors, visual processors, and even the motor processors from the Broca's area or front motor cortex. We also began looking at how in order to get reading comprehension, you have two components. You have word recognition and language comprehension. You need both of those in order to get reading comprehension. This is a multiplication sentence on purpose because just as in a multiplication sentence, if one of those is missing, the result is 0. So Louisa says that many struggling students need explicit systematic instruction before they habitually notice those details in both speech and print. And so that's why from our previous discussion, we have to be explicit, systematic, and sequential. Let's take this simple view of reading and let's expand that into Scarborough's rope, which is the more in-depth look at how reading is developed. So we know that Scarborough developed this rope because it has so many facets of reading that as you get more ability to read or more capable of reading, you will get to interweave those and they become more tightly knitted until you have a skilled reader that has those skills intricately woven together. Now, in the younger grades, you do tend to see some of these a little bit more compartmentalized because you're working on the foundations to these skills. 3rd grade and up, you start seeing these interwoven a lot more tightly and how they flow into each other very, very well. Let's talk a little bit about each one of these pieces. For example, I'm going to go back just a little bit. Sorry about that. Background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge is all the language comprehension side of the rope. And phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition is the word recognition side of the rope. Now, the terminologies for decoding and sight recognition are not what we typically think of or what the terminologies have been transitioned into. Decoding is breaking that English code that's attaching a sound to letter connection, and sight word recognition is building up the automaticity to the point where they can see it by sight. So decoding really should be rephrased as encoding and spelling. Sight recognition needs to be rephrased as decoding. This is our blending words where they're the ability to read the word. So in this webinar version, I would like teachers to take an objective for themselves, taking our last discussion about explicit, systematic, and sequential instruction and giving themselves a target of I will be able to teach these because I'm doing these things. So if we want to think smarter about instruction, then as a teacher, you will be able to explicitly teach the foundational skills of reading to mastery with immediate corrective feedback. That means you're going to be teaching them and modeling directly these skills, what they feel like, what they sound like, where they occur, and you're going to practice them, but you're going to listen to the students responding and participating with you because the feedback that you're going to give is a corrective feedback right there in the moment, immediately, and seeing the errors and bringing it back to the correct production of the sound or the correct connection between the right letters. As a smart teacher, you will be able to systematically teach those skills through instructional routines that will guide students to correct responses and maximize time on task. So think about the procedures. Think about how to put in a routine where the students are frequently responding and they are not just pulling something out of the blue. You've guided them to what they should be doing. Also, you will be able to sequence those skills taught with prerequisite foundational skills first that directly support higher order skills across your lessons and across your grade levels, and I would even say within your lesson. So use that kind of help as a gauge, or are you being a explicit, systematic, and sequential teacher? Are you doing those things? So let's take another look at that word recognition flow. If I want my lesson to be systematic, explicit, and sequential, then I am going to begin my whole class lesson with phonological awareness. I'm going to build up those abilities, those routines. Haggerty is a great way to do this, but I can also tap into what my curriculum provides and specifically and explicitly teach a certain skill. But I'm going to build that up as a whole class, and then I'm going to go from that, activating that machine, to setting up the foundation. Now, the setting up the foundation is when you happen to talk about the articulation of the sound. What does the sound look like? You can look at, are your lips together? Are you blocking the sound? Are you popping the sound out when you open your mouth? Is your voice box on? What are your teeth doing? What is your tongue doing? Then you have, in younger grades, can you hear the sound? Do you identify the sound in the word at all? Then in older grades and still in younger grades, you're going to move to where is the sound located? Is it beginning, middle, and end? Because the next step is to look at some of those phonotactic rules to why certain sounds can't follow other certain sounds, or what happens when certain sounds do follow, such as what happens to those vowel sounds when an N is following it. All of that happens in setting your phoneme foundation. Now, you also have the next step. Once this foundation has been established and your co-articulation has been a part of that, you are going to make the letter sound connection. This is done through orthographic mapping. Now, we establish the letter that goes with the sound, and then we attach any rules or spelling rules for whatever patterns we're going to use. This is why placement of the sound is so important, because a lot of our spelling rules will depend upon placement, and some of these spelling rules depend on the sounds that precede it. So we'll tap out the sounds, we'll map it, we'll make those connections. I love spelling boxes because they do an excellent job. Oops, I went too fast. Sorry about that. They do an excellent job of helping to take that sound as a unit that we're going to be using IGH for I sound and keeping it within the box. There are other ways you can do that with word sorts, with word chaining. Those also map out that code. Then we're going to move into the unify and decode. We're going to use word families. We're going to do continuous blending. We're going to use routines to help build our fluency, to help build up our word reading. And yes, this is when you start bringing in some of your morphology as well. It's in these two sections here, because you're dealing with word parts and you're having your children become word analysis students. They can think of the sounds attached to letters. This becomes their code. You'll actually find that this decoding is last because it's a byproduct of all these other things that you're doing. And decoding actually gets a lot easier once you've established that connection. Now, if we were going to dive into the language side of the rope, we might look at some of these other key features of the language comprehension side. I'm going to pass over this for now because we will talk about this more come next year. But just a heads up, instead of being a flow, language comprehension doesn't ever have an end. If you look at the river, a river will come to the ocean. You'll be able to read. Word recognition is a finite skill. At some point, the children are going to be able to read. But language comprehension doesn't have an ending. Yes, your children are going to be able to write, and yes, they're going to be able to talk about things, but our understanding and our comprehension of what we read is ever growing and ever changing until the day we die. So we work on building these up and realize that it's going to continue to develop as time goes by. That's why it's one of the more difficult things to diagnose. There are ways to do diagnostic testing to let them know where they are on this process, but we will talk about those at another time. So, in brief, this is the kingdom of language comprehension. The way we see this kingdom or communicate is how we're going to share information through writing. So you're going to see a lot of the ways that we're going to tap into how they understand or what they understand through their writing. The king is syntax, how they're using the words they're able to decode in a sentence and what those words mean. So the queen is vocabulary, and she hails from the kingdom of background knowledge. If that background knowledge is strong, then she is a strong queen that can work alongside how those words are used in the syntax or the king. Together, they're going to build the bulk of your comprehension. Knowing what the words mean and how the words are used is going to boost their ability to talk through some of those comprehension skills, such as making inferences or drawing conclusions. That's what's verbal reasoning. Verbal reasoning is their ability to explain what's going on, why things happen this way, what will happen next, could this mean something else. All of those big comprehension skills are all housed in this idea of verbal reasoning. They defend your understanding. Language structure is a byproduct of the vocabulary and the syntax and how those sentences are working together, how we've organized the information so that we can get certain deeper levels of understanding because of that organization. Things like simile, personification, figures of speech, all of that is found within the literary knowledge and how the nuances of these two, syntax and vocabulary, interact for semantics and how that can change a little bit of our understanding. So as you can see, this can get pretty complicated, but yes, kindergartners can understand all of these things. We just need to make sure to recognize as teachers it is a process and it's an ongoing process, and there's a lot of scaffolding that happens within this world. The point of this world is not their ability to read, but what they're gaining from what they're reading. Okay, so how in the world am I going to establish these abilities in kindergarten and second and third and fifth grade? Well, that'll be our next section. So we're going to pause here for just a minute and have you take a look at this chart, and then we'll talk about what this chart is doing in a 4-day week for establishing a strong core foundation in word recognition. Okay, so now you've had an opportunity to pause the video or take a few minutes to look at it. We want to establish this course. This is whole class instruction. Now, these are just a general outview or an outline with some ideas of how you can incorporate this. Your curriculum is an excellent place to tap into where it fits into some of these locations, but that's also something we can discuss in our one-to-one coaching sessions, is how these pieces could look or where you could get the resources from them. Now, at the very beginning of every lesson, it is highly recommended that you do a 3-part drill review of the skills that you have previously taught. So take all of the phonics sound to letter connections that you have learned and do a visual drill, an auditory drill, and a blending drill. They shouldn't take a lot of time. Really, the whole thing could take 5 to 7 minutes because you're just spending some time reviewing those skills you have previously established and giving them some extra time to practice to mastery. Now, we'll take a little bit closer look at some of that in the next coming chapters and in our coaching sessions of what does a visual drill look like, what does an auditory drill look like, and a blending drill. But for our purposes here, we're going to go ahead and continue with the flow. Phonological awareness is that next step. So you're going to activate that language processor and give them some extra practice. So things like Haggerty is a great way to practice that. Any of your curriculum that has blending phonemes, manipulating phonemes, identifying the middle, those things are excellent to put into here. You want to be very purposeful and make sure that you're thinking sequentially to get all the skills mastered, and taking a time maybe once in a while, say, hey, let's explicitly teach this one because they're still struggling, but give them practice every day. Then on Monday, this is the introduction to your new concept. So we should be looking at articulation and co-articulation for that new sound. We're not introducing any letters yet. We're just thinking about the sound, identifying it in a word and locating it. Once you have a good establishment of that phoneme, you've set that phoneme foundation, then you're going to encode. My favorite is to show them the letter pattern, talk about the spelling rule that goes with it, and then use Elkanon boxes to help them orthographically map that. Spend the bulk of your time here. Now, there are, in younger grades, opportunities after that to take the sound, you've just taught them the letter that goes with it, to do handwriting and have that next modality of helping that strengthen their connection between the letter and the sound. So that might be a recommendation that you do on Monday. Older grades, you might bring in some blending boards so that you can unify and decode. If you find that you're running out of time because you are spending such a good amount of time here getting this code established, use the encoding routine that has embedded decoding in it and be able to skip that for the day and move to more decoding the next day. So on Tuesday, again, 3-part drill, review of skills, phonological awareness. You can review the articulation if needed, but you may not need to. If you did a really good job this day, you might just tap in and see if they still remember it. Then do some more encoding or pattern sorting, do some more orthographic mapping. Now this one doesn't have to be as intensive as the first day because you're going to spend some good chunk of time doing your blending boards and using decodables. Now you'll notice that the purple is gone on Wednesday because this is a third day with the skill. Once you've got your warm-up practice done, you can split your time between the encoding and the decoding. And pull back on the letter sound connection guidance as needed as you see the students taking the opportunity and being more independent on that and transition into more decoding. Then on Thursday after your warm-up, give them a sound review, do a very quick encoding review, and then go ahead and assess them. Give that spelling test or dictation test and see if they're retaining what you've practiced all week. And then spend the rest of the time in decodable readers, giving them a chance to respond to what they're reading in the decodable text. More opportunities to read those words in context. Now, again, we're going to kind of really quickly bypass the language comprehension because that's not our focus this year, but I will come back to it, I promise. So here's a sample lesson of word recognition that I'd like to kind of walk you through. This is just a day one. So this is a third grade lesson. We're going to be encoding, decoding, and giving that set the phoneme foundation. We're going to do all of that day one. So here comes our phonological awareness. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take some sounds and we're going to blend them together. The word is d, a, g. Our whole word is dog. Nice job. So you'll do several of those with them. Then if we're segmenting, boys and girls, the word is dog. Let's break that up into its sounds. D, a, g. Good job. Now here I'm going to give you the end part of a word. I'm going to ask you to add a sound to the front. The end part is og. Would you please add on d? The word is dog. Good job. Now we're going to give you a word part and I would like you to toss that first sound and tell me what is left. The word is dog. What is dog without the d? Just og. Nice job. I notice I'm using the same word because I'm just teaching an example. You would not be doing the same word through the whole thing, and you would be doing several practices with different words before you move to the next skill. Let's swap the phoneme now. Let's take the word dog and let's change that d to h, and we get hog. So this is just an example of how you can use some visual helpers to scaffold in some of these more difficult skills for students who might be having a more challenging time understanding what they're doing with these sounds. All right, visual drill. Visual drill, remember, is skills and patterns you have previously taught. What you're going to ask them to do is to see the letter and tell you the sound that they know it can represent. So, sound or, sound or, sound are. So you're saying sound, the students are telling you the sound. Y, E, I. If you have taught all of those representations, you should be listening for all three of those possibilities. J, G. Now, some teachers have asked me, well, what about J? I wouldn't accept it when it was just like this. If it was a GE, a GY, or a GI, then I would accept those answers. But just as a G by itself, only accept the G. Ch, ch, k. Again, would you accept the C, the S off C? Nope, because you don't have the rule that requires that to occur. It's not CE, CI, or CY. If those were on this card, then I would accept the S. We are looking at spelling patterns here. A, I would accept A because in a two-syllable word, a single letter A can say A. I or I, O or A, E or E, again for those same reasons in certain situations, the single letter, open syllable, can make that sound all by itself. U or ng, th or th. Now we're going to move to an auditory drill. The students will have a whiteboard out and you are looking for the spelling representation that you have taught. If the sound is j and you have taught all of these representations, you are looking for those. If you have just taught J and DGE, then you would not be expecting to see those yet. So this is just a review of sounds they know. So you would say the sound J, the student would be writing down, ready, set, show me, you are doing a visual check. If a student is missing one that you've taught, you can just quickly go back and say, boys and girls, remember DGE can also spell J after it follows a short vowel. Now we're going to go to a blending drill, and a blending drill can be continuous blending. It can also be word chaining. So this is an example of using a blending drill with word chaining. I would start off with sound, the students are responding with the sound, r, blend, mar, word, mar. I'm going to drop the and replace it with t, blend, tar, the word is tar. Good job, boys and girls. I am going to add on a t at the end. Let's continuously blend. Tart, word is tart. Good job. I'm going to add on a s at the beginning. Let's blend. Art, the word is start. Good job. I'm going to drop out that R and I'm going to add in a Let's blend that one. At, the word is stat. I'm going to drop that T and I'm going to bring in a letter P. Let's blend that one. Sp, at, spat. Good job, boys and girls. Let's drop that S or that S, and now we have pat. Good job. The word is pat. So you can do a lot of word chaining with that and just be walking them through and scaffolding them through that. Now we're ready to go into our new content. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment. Okay, we are going to set our phoneme foundation. I like to use a video with an actual student making the sound because it makes a better connection, but you do not have to do this. So if I was doing this with a class, I would say, boys and girls, I'm going to have you listen to this young man. He's going to make a sound. I want you to grab the sound he makes, put it in your mouth, and hold it there until I point to you, and then you're going to tell me the sound you heard. Ready? Go. I'm going to do that one more time because it was a little quiet. So I had the students grab that sound, hold it in the mouth, and I go 1, 2, 3. The sound, hopefully is what I hear repeated. So I then move to here and say, boys and girls, this sound was Our mouth is slightly open and our lips are slightly puckered. Our tongue is going to be high in the middle of our mouth, kind of spread between, almost touching the sides of our teeth, the back of our teeth, on both sides of our mouth. We are going to have a very powerful R sound on this vowel, and so we are going to hear our voice on, and it's going to be sounding Our teeth are just resting right now because we have our tongue pushed almost to touching the inside of our back of our teeth. Is our vowel plus R. This is a vowel that is overpowered by our R, so we hear a lot of that little bit of a sound coming in, but it's mostly the So our sound is to have them check their mouth, check their neighbor's mouth. If it was younger grade, I would say some words and say, do you hear the sound in fern? Do you hear in rooster? At the end you do. That wasn't a good example. Do you hear the sound in runt? And you want them to say no because and R are not the same thing. So let's do an older grade. I would have them tell me where they heard this sound, beginning, middle, or end. Boys and girls, where is the sound in fern? That's in the middle. How about earn? Ooh, that's at the beginning. What about the sound in father? Father. Is at the end. So give them some practice listening for where that sound occurs. Then we go right into our sound wall. Boys and girls, the is located right over here out of our vowel valley because it is unique. It is using almost two little pieces of two sounds to make its own sound, an R-controlled sound. Right there. So let's think about what we're going to use to spell that one. Well, we have ER, IR, and UR can all be used to make the sound. Now, can be spelt with an ER if it is in the middle and it is followed by a consonant. Cool. It can also be used as if it's a suffix, such as making nouns, verbs, or adjectives, baker, gather, darker. You hear it at the end, it's going to be a suffix. We're going to use ER. Now let's take a look at IR. IR can be, wait a minute, and I always have fun with kids because it is true. IR can be in the middle followed by a consonant, and all of them say the same thing, like, what? But that's the same thing you said for ER. You're right. This is one of the reasons why English is a little tricky. So we give ourselves some helpful hints. It doesn't always prove true, but it does give us a first guess option, something to help us along so we're not just randomly throwing letter combinations together. So we have IR in the middle, if followed by a consonant, and most often that consonant is going to be a D, T, and a M. If you hear one of those sounds, you've got a pretty good chance that that is going to be spelled with an IR. Now, UR is actually more often used than either IR or ER in the middle. So if I had to choose, my first pick would be UR. If I heard a D, T, TH, or M, I would choose an IR before I would choose a UR. And then if those all still looked a little strange to my third grade brain, I would go and try that ER. So yes, there's a little bit of guess and check, but it is a smarter guess and check. And the kids can usually depend on some of these helpful hints. Now, I may mention for those older grades that there is a variation, EAR, which is a vowel plus vowel R combo that says And this is a spelling that is left over from Old English way back in the day before we had our major vowel shift. And we've kept the spelling, but our vowel changed to instead of ER. Yep, gotta love the transitions of late English. So once we've established that, this is another reason why it's so important to give them practice applying these little rules that you just walked through, and you're gonna guide them through their choice selection. So on the side, when we're gonna build words with the Elkonin boxes, I never say that right, I'm gonna give them those helpful hints of at the end in a 2-syllable word is gonna be ER. If I hear in the middle, I'm going to use UR as my first pick. If I hear in the middle, this is why it is in yellow, and I'm going to be listening for any of these sounds because then I want to try IR as my first pick. If I hear at the beginning, I'm going to try that Old English spelling because that's really the only time he really pops in there. So let's try one. Let's do fern. Now that was my example on the other page, but fern, if I say I have 3 sounds. I'd mark in 3 boxes. First sound is second sound is last sound is I'm going to pop to my helpful hints. I would try UR, but something would look funny, and I know that the end sound is not one of my indicators. So I do have that opportunity of, UR looks weird. It's probably ER. Okay, so once we've done a lot of practice with that, then we want to blend words with the sound. We're going to have a word up there. I might point out to the IR and say sound, blend, whirl, read, whirl, 3 times fast, whirl, 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 and put some embedded vocabulary. Whirling is in a circular motion very quickly. Since it's in a circular kind of form, that's one of the reasons why we have WH as the W. You would go on and you could do the same thing in practice with the rest of these words. You notice I'm not doing a lot because this is a byproduct of learning and establishing that code. Now you can add some sentence practice in there using lots of opportunity with that pattern in it. That's what a true decodable is many opportunities to see that pattern in usage and practice that pattern. Putting it into a paragraph for later in the week is another great option. Okay, now if we had a little bit more time, I'd go through more of what upper grades would bring in some of this morphology, some of these word parts review, what you would do with those. We're going to wait and save this for our language comprehension side. So I'm going to kind of pass through the vocabulary where we're looking at some of the word parts, things to look at and focus on so they get a really good understanding and build up their vocabulary. I'm also going to skip through a little bit of the language comprehension part of the lesson. So let's dive into intervention. Excuse me. Intervention is now where we have established the core, we've taught the bulk of the lesson, and now what we need to do is fill in the potholes. Now this can be a whole webinar all into itself. So I'm going to conclude this webinar with the chapter 8 and chapter 1, and we'll have a separate webinar for intervention.